as our guest for the evening. Before I say anything, I'm delighted and honored to have her as our guest for today. According to Rystad Energy Survey, over oil and gas professionals are looking for work, with 30 to 40% of them being recent graduates. As a result, all freshers are wondering how to get into the oil and gas industry. So today we'll talk about the numerous opportunities, training and skill sets needed to work in the oil and gas industry. Before that, I'd like to give a brief introduction of our guest. Yogeshri Pradhan is a senior reservoir engineer for Endeavour Energy Resources. At Endeavour, she's involved with field development planning for unconventionals in the Midland Basin. She is the recipient of the Regional Reservoir Engineering Dynamics and Description and the Regional Service Awards in 2020. She is also the recipient of Houston Energy's Week Young Engineer of the Year, representing SPE Gulf Coast section for 2018, and the International Young Member Outstanding Service Award from SPE in 2018. Yogeshri graduated from University of Texas with a bachelor's in petroleum engineering in 2015 and received her master's in petroleum engineering at Texas A&M University in 2020. She's a registered professional engineer in the state of Texas. Welcome, ma'am. So before we start, can I have a small brief from you about how has your journey so far been in the oil and gas industry?
First and foremost, thanks so much for the kind introduction, Shivangi. And it's a really interesting question that you mentioned, that how my journey has been in the oil and gas industry. I think you may have all known that this is a very volatile industry. I graduated in 2015 when oil prices took a nosedive, and I was fortunate to have had some work experience before I switched to another work experience. I worked for EDvantageindia Energy for about a year, and then within a year, I switched to working for an organization called University Lands. And then after a couple of years of that, I started working for Endeavour Energy Resources. The fact that I've had 3 jobs within 6 years shows the volatility of this industry, and my job changes were not by choice. A lot of it had to do with due to the commodity pricing. My journey in oil and gas has been more resilient than anything. It's been very encouraging, because not only have I been able to secure employment during times of low oil prices, but I've also been able to encourage other people in how they can survive the volatility of the oil prices and what resources they can use. When I was looking for work, I would reach out to a contact each day, and they would provide at least one resource that I would use, or a networking event that I would go to. And I did one networking event each day during the weekday, or I met somebody each and every single day. So my journey in the oil and gas industry has been it's been a lot of work, but it's also been very resilient. And I would also say it's been a very positive one, because I've met a lot of contacts along the way, and I've been able to provide advice whenever I can along the way too.
Great. So since you talked about the volatility of the industry, the first question that comes to my mind to ask is, how, in brief, has COVID impacted the oil industry? Because that has had a huge impact. And what are some of the immediate changes and intermediate changes and the long-term changes? And how many of these changes, according to you, are going to stay in, and other ones can be incorporated gradually in a short period of time?
That's a really great question. And I had to think a lot about, I would have to think a lot about this one. I would say that COVID has definitely impacted the industry to be a little bit more remote. I know quite a few people that have lost their jobs due to COVID, so they have to come up with creative solutions on how they can come up with a stream of income. So I would say that COVID has impacted the industry, not just with a demand shock with negative oil prices, which we all observed last year, but also how we work as a team and how we communicate with each other and how operations can still be run efficiently. In the short term, COVID has impacted the change in terms of increasing your safety standards, especially with sanitization and with how you are interacting with other people and how to take sicknesses extremely seriously if you are experiencing a sickness. For immediate and long term, I'm going to group this one together. I would say that I think more companies would be more open to flexible working hours and more open to remote working if needed. It completely depends on the company culture in terms of whether if you prefer to be in person most of the time or whether if you can work remotely. But what we have seen through COVID is that it is definitely possible to work remotely, and it is possible to run operations even though it may not be as efficient initially, but it is possible. So remote working has been a little bit more accepted. Flexible working has been a little bit more accepted. And I would also say that there's been an emphasis on communication. There's been an emphasis on how to improve operations even remotely, like you don't have to be there 100% of the time. So the intermediate and long-term changes I would see that COVID is affecting is how we've been able to work. And the short-term changes I would see is how we've been able to interact with each other, especially with health and safety.
I request the host to please put off the setting and let me unmute according to me, please. I'll appreciate if that is possible. Yeah. Going forward with the next question, which pertains to the topic. What do you think is the future petroleum engineering is going to look like in terms of skill sets and the job scope?
I get this question a lot, and I've also asked this question to our SP president, Dr. Tom Blasingame, in our The Way Ahead interview. And he's mentioned about how energy transition is real. And I would also say that the energy transition or the emphasis on renewables or emphasis on other sources of energy has been a focus for larger companies if they can diversify their operations that way. I would say that in terms of skill set, learning about different types of energy is going to be, or having a background knowledge of different types of energy is going to be pretty useful, especially if you want to pursue a master's in business administration or an MBA. I would also say that data analytics has always been a hot topic. So a focus on data analytics and machine learning and anything that you can do to make data gathering a lot easier and data mining a lot cheaper for your employer is going to be marketable and competitive. I will definitely say that. So for the next few years, I would say a continued focus on data analytics, machine learning, data science, along with that domain expertise of petroleum engineering, because that is extremely important. There's so many data scientists that you can hire, but to have the domain expertise to understand what variables are important is very critical. And then the energy transition, considering that is also a focus, having a background knowledge on renewables, on different types of energy, and knowing how they work. Geothermal is going to be very important as well. I would say that knowing how you can apply your petroleum engineering skills to other types of energy is going to be extremely important. Reservoir engineering, for example, is a transferable skill to geothermal. I mean, understanding how to extract hydrocarbons, and same with hydraulic fracturing. That's an example. So I would say that understanding what other sources, what it takes for other sources of energy to become marketable, and then knowing how you can transfer those skills is going to be that mindset shift for petroleum engineers.
Now, since you've listed down these skill sets, the first question that comes to my mind is that 70% of the graduates, or even more than that, they lack these skill sets and knowledge that usually most of the oil and gas companies seek. So in your opinion, what is to be blamed for this chasm, like the college, the student, or the curriculum in which we have been taught?
Oh man, that's a tough question because I don't like pointing fingers at anybody. I've learned a lot in college, I'll admit, and I'm very thankful for my professors. I will say there is a lag between what industry wants to know versus what academia is going to teach. And that's why it's so important to have industry and academia relations or alumni boards that have esteemed alumni that can provide some knowledge on how to influence the curriculum. I would not blame the student because the student has only so much access to certain resources. I get approached a lot for senior design projects, for example, and if I can provide data for these particular students for them to do some good engineering work because they need real data. And unfortunately, not everyone has access to real data to apply their petroleum engineering skills. So even if they have the skill set, the practice or the application is still lacking. And then for colleges, I wouldn't blame colleges either about the lag, because it takes some time to implement that curriculum into academia and to get that approval and everything. I would say I wouldn't say it would be a blame. I would say there needs to be more work done by the student and more work done by the college, and also more work done by the industry. I know there's a lot of competitive advantage that can happen if you release data, for example, but if we have more industry relations with colleges to provide data for students, they can practice on real life data and they can apply their petroleum engineering skill sets and say in their resumes that, hey, I was able to use this on a real data set and I'm able to apply my petroleum engineering or data science skills. So yes, there's definitely a lag in the skill set or even perspective, and having a closer relationship between industry and academia is extremely important to solve that problem. So I'm not going to assign a blame for this question. I'm just going to frame it as what are some opportunities of improvement. From the student's perspective, joining a professional organization and connecting with people that are outside of the industry, but instead of asking, can you give me a job, asking what are some resources I can use to help me get a job. From the college's perspective, having that proactivity to integrate with industry to know how you can influence the curriculum and make that process a little bit faster. And from industry, being able to contribute, making that contribution a priority, because these are going to be the future of this is going to be the future of your workforce that you're trying to influence, and you want them to go up the learning curve as quickly as possible. I mean, you don't want to have a gap between fresh graduate petroleum engineers and then someone with a couple years of work experience. There's nothing you can't replace work experience with anything else. There's just some things you just have to learn in the workplace, but improving that connection, having mentorship and sponsorship programs between students and industries and having colleges facilitate that is extremely important, I would say.
Right. Great that we're not blaming anyone. That was a good point. I really appreciate it. So According to the energy, it has been seen that those with high skill sets and data science knowledge get hired. However, how does an individual prepare for employment looking at the digitalization boom that the industry is going through right now?
Well, let me go back to that question for a little bit. Let's see. How does the individual prepare for, how does the individual prepare for the employment for the digitalization boom? Well, I've seen this done with a lot of students that they've been very proactive in doing this. But getting those nano degrees online like Coursera and Udacity and Udemy are extremely important to prepare for employment, because you are getting those courses from companies that are sponsoring a skill set that they are saying that's very important. I would also say being in tune with your professional organization and being understanding of what is happening in the industry. So being involved with Society of Petroleum Engineers, or if you're a geologist, American Association of Petroleum Geology or geologists, and other organizations that are similar, being involved with them and knowing what are the latest and greatest technology trends. I would say that that's one way to prepare for the digitalization boom. As I mentioned about courses, I also think taking advantage of SP's resources, such as their webinar series and some of the live events that they're having during certain times of the day internationally, is going to be extremely important as well. So taking advantage of resources that are outside of what is traditionally given at university is one way to make yourself go up the learning curve. And it's going to take a lot of work, and sometimes students just don't know. So it can be as simple as asking your faculty or asking your college or alumni that you can connect with. And when you can connect with them, they can provide some resources.
I request Bhaskar Reddy to please mute yourself.
Okay, thank you, madam.
If you have any queries, you can please drop down in the chat box. We can have the session going smoothly.
No, madam. Okay, thank you, madam. Sorry.
Sorry, ma'am. Please continue.
Oh, I was done with my point.
Okay. So basically, we have a focus on the courses, as students said. Since you rightly said, there's a limited access to the resources, and honestly, sometimes we even forget or we overlook these resources, and we can make the maximum out of it. So moving on to the next question, what value addition do you think a master's degree provides to bachelors in petroleum engineering? And since you've done that, so maybe you can share your experience with us, which you had at Texas A&M.
Sure. I chose to get a master's degree at Texas A&M because, well, one, I didn't want to leave the industry while getting the graduate degree. And Texas A&M provided that opportunity, and it's one of the best schools in the world for petroleum engineering. So I took that opportunity, but I also wanted to take that opportunity because I wanted to refine my technical skills. There was a general knowledge that you obtain when you're getting your bachelor's degree. You learn about the theory, but you don't take a deep dive. And it's a learning, and you're trying to familiarize yourself with petroleum engineering terminology and everything. But when you're doing your master's degree, you take those subjects to another level. You take a deeper dive. You learn about the derivations. You not just learn about the theory, you learn about, I mean, at A&M, we also learn about application as well, but you learn about the deeper side of the theory. You actually learn how to derive those equations. You have to apply some theoretical, you have to apply what you've learned to theoretical projects. And I really enjoyed my experience at Texas A&M because I was able to think very differently about certain topics compared to how I thought about them as an undergraduate. I was able to learn lots of underpinnings, and I was able to focus a lot more on certain reservoir engineering topics. And I was even able to apply what I've learned in the workplace. A requirement at Texas A&M is to take a course that is outside of the department. So I took a regression analysis course. As a result, I'm doing multivariate analysis very easily. I've been able to pick that up really quickly at work, and I do a bunch of data analytics and multivariate analysis on the job and provide a lot of value for the company. There were other special elective courses that you can take that are relating to unconventionals, and the curriculum that we have as a bachelor's is mostly focused on conventional reservoirs. So my focus in unconventional reservoirs at Texas A&M University also benefited me at my job in learning the technical side of unconventionals, because there's a lot you can learn on the job, but it really depends on how much exposure you get on the job. At Texas A&M, you get an exposure, you get a deeper dive into unconventional reservoirs and their theory a lot more. So that's the benefit I would say that you would get as a master's student. As a master's student, you'd be able to think differently and think critically and be able to understand the why much better compared to a bachelor's in petroleum engineering who had a bunch of subjects thrown at them and they have a good understanding of different subjects. However, with a master's degree, you're able to understand the underpinnings, you're able to apply that in research because you're supposed to do research, and you're able to, you can speak about technical topics to a granularity that not a lot of people can get to. You also learn the discipline, for example, of research, of how it takes to write your thesis and what it takes to present papers and whatnot. So that is an experience that I wanted to get as a master's, and presenting to an executive board or presenting to management, for example, is going to be a common practice on the job. So you learn a lot of life skills, you learn a lot of academia, and you learn about the underpinnings of a lot of topics when you pursue a master's. And those are some of the experiences that I want to share, and those are some of the advantages I think that one would have when pursuing a graduate degree.
Okay. We have a bunch of questions from the audience, so I would like to take that first. We have one from Omkar Anbekar. I have completed my BSc in geology. What should I do next to work in petroleum industry? Could you please guide us about the roadmap to reach there?
That's a really great question, Omkar. One thing I would mention is a lot of the people do not get a full-time job unless they have a master's in geology, from my understanding. So perhaps being open to pursuing a master's degree in geology, and maybe if you have the opportunity to pursue it in the United States, that would be really interesting. I also have met people who have gotten their bachelor's in geology and they didn't pursue their master's. They eventually pursued their master's while working full time. So you can definitely still get into the petroleum industry. I would strongly suggest being in touch with your faculty in terms of if they can connect you to an alumni that works in the industry. Or I would also suggest you be involved with SPE, not just in their student chapter, but in the professional section in the city that you're located in. If you are involved in the professional section, there are quite a few people that have already been working in companies that you can make connections with, and they can provide you some more advice on how you can create your roadmap to getting into the petroleum industry. So getting involved with a professional organization, considering a master's degree, and then reaching out to alumni are my top 3 pieces of advice.
I hope, Omkar, that addresses your question. The next one I'd like to quickly take from Pranjal Sharma. I'm in my final year, have applied on various ONG, oil and gas company websites, and I don't have any strong references as of now. So how to enter into petroleum industry through off campus?
That's a really great question. It's going to take some time to develop some strong references. And when you say, I would also ask, why are you saying they aren't strong references? I would say professors are strong references because they've seen your work and they can advocate for all the work that you've done. If you're involved with SPE, the faculty advisor of who runs SPE in your student chapter would be another great reference. So there are some possibilities of where you can get some strong references. So how to enter the petroleum industry, you'll have to think creatively, and it would be the same advice that I would give to Omkar, and that you would need to invest your time into being involved with SPE with the professional section in the city that you're involved in. So for example, if you are in Mumbai, you'd be involved in the Mumbai section. Or if you're in Bangalore, you'd be in the Bangalore section. There's a North India section too. There's also a South India section as well. So I would suggest being in touch with those sections, and you may need to reach out to a faculty member of who can get you involved in those sections. So that's one way to enter the industry off campus. And when I say it's going to take some time, once you make that connection with people that are working in the industry, then it takes some time to build that trust and build that relationship. So make sure you build that relationship and you build that trust to develop a strong reference. And once you take those volunteering positions and leadership positions within SPE in the professional section, then I would suggest that those would be really great examples for you to write on your resume and prove to the potential employer that you can work for their company.
Okay, next I'll take from Farman Khan. Ma'am, can you share the best course in AI application in geophysics, seismic phases prediction?
Oh my gosh, I may not be the best person to answer that question. However, I will say a resource that you can reach out to is the Society of Exploration Geophysicists, or SEG, or you can also search on Coursera. And, you know, why don't I search that for you right now? I mean, I could do Coursera seismic AI, and I don't know if that's going to be the best course, but that is probably going to be one of the courses that you may want to consider. So I would say search on Coursera or search through the Society of Exploration Geophysicists, and I would say that's probably your best bet to go. And I just put a link on here that will help you. I mean, it's also a quick Google search. So seismic AI geophysics course SEG. If you just do that, then yeah, deep learning application to seismic data. I've already found a course for you. And I know it's postponed, but you may want to keep in touch with how you can get involved. So I just sent you 2 courses, and there's one that's called Deep Learning with Seismic Data. So hopefully that will help you. But it's a quick search on Google.
Okay, I hope that addressed your question, Farman. Before I take the further questions, I'd like to ask one question that I had. So what are the few oil and gas areas that you see has scope to improve or change drastically in the future?
Oh man, that's a really good question too. It depends on whether if you work in conventional or unconventional reservoirs, I would say. I think reservoir engineering, there's been definitely some improvement because there's been a better understanding of how unconventional plays work. And then I'm coming from an unconventional play background. That's why I'm saying it reservoir engineering. But I would also say reservoir engineering for conventional and unconventional based on data analytics, data science, and machine learning with reservoir engineering applications. I would say that has been a scope that's improved drastically since I started in my career. Now, another thing I would say that has also improved drastically is hydraulic fracturing. Now, hydraulic fracturing has been a focus for many years in unconventional plays, but I would say hydraulic fracturing technology has improved based on how we see things down hole. There's a lot of technology companies that show how your perfs look like when you fracked down hole. Like there's one called Dark Vision, there's one called EV, for instance. There's a couple companies out there that show you that do the downhole cameras. Now, hydraulic fracturing has also improved, I would say, because we've improved our understanding in what are some optimal completions technologies, what are some cost-conscious completions techniques that we can use. So I'm mostly observing that from the unconventional space and in the Permian Basin. But I would also say that you might also observe that in offshore, for instance. And if anybody that has had an offshore internship, please feel free to mention that in the comments or something. So I would say reservoir engineering and hydraulic fracturing, there's definitely been some improvements.
Okay, so we have a bunch of questions. Now, before moving to that, I'd like to quickly take 2 minutes and address a course that Advantage India has recently. Machine learning and its application in oil and gas upstream sector. So it's a case study oriented training program which anybody can pursue, and the training topics include introduction to geoscience and reservoir characterization, introduction of ML application in oil and gas, to Python application, data mining application, and machine and deep learning application. So you'll be provided with recorded lectures, notes, assignments, and many more. And you can enroll as a participant. The registration fees for students is $50 and for professionals is $100. So if you want, you can text us on LinkedIn or you can reach out to us to address any queries. Thank you. So moving on to the questions that I have. Well, there are a lot of questions. So I'll take the one from Asim Ranjan. I have completed my MSc in geology. How to get job in oil industry in abroad?
Wow. Yeah, I've gotten that question a lot too on how you can get a job abroad. And I have that experience really, but from what I've understood from people that have gotten a job abroad in the United States or maybe in the UK, for example, is connecting with their faculty to see if they can connect them to somebody that is doing some research abroad, whether if it's in the United States or whether if it's in the UK or anywhere you'd want to study abroad. Most likely it will be in the United States. Another one is also a very quick Google search on which professors you want to work with at different universities. I've seen some students that they have sent cold emails to research professors at Texas A&M University or at University of Texas, and they talk about how in the world are they going to get funding, how they can come abroad, and a lot of it is just taking a chance, just trying to apply for programs if you want to do a PhD. And I'm speaking if you want to continue the academic route. Now on the job route, I would suggest you need to connect with your faculty to see if they can connect with you with somebody in the United States. A creative way is getting in touch with the section board officers, the SP section board officers in the United States to see how they can help you connect or how they can help you network. And sometimes it's also cold visiting some companies as well to present your resume to see if they can sponsor you too. And I mean, there's only so many job applications that you can send, and there's only so many ways that you can be overlooked that way. So the way you can be noticed is getting involved with the section in the United States, in the location that you want to go to, visiting the United States, and even cold visiting some companies and knowing which ones do their sponsorships, and then connecting with your professor or with the faculty to see if there's any way that you can work abroad.
Okay, I hope that addressed your question. I'd like to take one from Maulid Ali. Near time, I want to start oil and gas work as a creative thinking company. So, what would you consult me?
So as I'm understanding the question, you want to start your own company and how to help you to start your own company. And that's something that I've been thinking about myself, actually. You need to have a team. You need to have other people that have different skill sets compared to you. Like if you're really good at reservoir engineering, you need to be friends with a production engineer. You need to be friends with a drilling, a geologist, a completion engineer. So find those friends. Next, find properties. You need to find properties of where you can invest in acreage development. Then you need to find investors. You need to find people who are willing to invest the capital in your operations. Then you need somebody who's really good at logistics. So I would say start with coming up with a group of people that you know you can start a company with, and then start doing your research on where exactly you want to invest or develop your assets in, and people who can invest in the company that you're trying to build, and making sure that you have all the infrastructure. Infrastructure is extremely important in data analysis, competitor analysis, and you really need to know how to budget for that too.
Okay, most of the questions that you guys are asking in the chat box, I can see, are already covered in the discussion. So you can anytime get back to the recording that we post on YouTube, and you can have your query answered. So like to take this question from Abdul Basit. I'm still an undergraduate student of geology, planning on going for my IT. Kindly advise on which sector to focus on to excel in the field.
Really good question. So I'm trying to read the question.
Actually, it's been sent privately to me. I'll just.
Oh, sent privately. So, okay. I was trying to find the question. So in your continuing IT and what sector you want to go in, there's so many oil and gas companies that will definitely want your expertise in IT. And I would say that going after operators who need their IT infrastructure built is a good opportunity for you to pursue if you're going to have an IT sector career. I would also say that if you are going to focus on IT, maybe some cybersecurity companies that have oil and gas clients is another good opportunity for you to consider. So the opportunities are endless for you, really, going after oil and gas companies that need the infrastructure, going after IT or going after cybersecurity companies that can use your expertise whenever you are working with oil and gas clients. And there are other machine learning AI companies that will need that infrastructure too. So you can practically work anywhere. You can practically work in any sector. It really depends on what you're interested in.
I hope that answered your question. Now I'd like to move to the last question that I had. What is your last message, ma'am, to the petroleum sector aspirants? In brief, if you would like to address them.
Sure. I had a really great time in terms of sharing my advice, sharing my experiences, and sharing what I know to the best of my ability to all of you. My words of advice are, and I posted this on Instagram actually, is to really never give up. If you are facing a problem or if you feel like you've hit a brick wall, just don't give up and keep going, and know that do something for your career every single day. Make sure you take care of yourself whenever you are pursuing your career. But I would also suggest that whenever you do reach out to somebody, don't just ask them to give you a job, because chances are they're probably not going to be able to do that for you. And really, it's not a good way to make a connection with somebody. Learn how to build a relationship with somebody. Learn how to build trust with somebody before you ask for an opportunity or ask for what kind of resources. When you ask for what kind of resources could you give me, there is a higher probability you will get a response. So I would say, do not give up, keep moving along and find creative ways to build your skill sets, such as reaching out to people that are outside of your student chapter. So being involved with your professional section, reaching out to alumni, reaching out to professionals, getting involved with different courses that are not offered by your schools, such as Coursera, Udacity, and Udemy, that are sponsored by machine learning AI companies. I would also say that when you do reach out to people, make sure you ask for what resources as opposed to asking them for a job. I would suggest that too, because I get that message all the time. And frankly, I've stopped answering people who've asked me to give them a job, but I do answer people who have asked me what resources they can provide or I can provide for them.
Well, that's a great tip of advice. The last question I'll take from the audience is from Mohammed Abbas. I'm having postdoc in geology and have remote sensing skill. Which company would be the best suited for me?
The company that would be best suited for you with the remote sensing skill and having a postdoc in geology would be those AI/ML companies that require those remote sensing skills. So being in the MIAL companies that are in that space is what I would suggest, that it may want to take advantage of your skill set. If not, a large multinational company that has a technology group, for instance, near in-house, is what I also suggest would be a good company for you.
I hope that answered your question, Abbas. Yeah, with that, I'm done with the questions set that I had. And I'm also, I guess I've covered most of the questions and the others were already covered while we were discussing, ma'am. So as I said, you can anytime go back to the recording of the entire session that we post on YouTube. And yeah, so we are done. Thank you, ma'am. It was a really knowledgeable session that we had. And we had approximately more than 50 participants today. And that's a great number. I think people just have learned a lot from today's session. So thank you once again.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed the time.
Thank you. Stay safe, everyone. And on that note, I'll end the session. Thank you.
Thank you.